Welcome to Let's Talk About It. I'm Sheena.
And I'm Tamara.
And today we're talking about EQ or IE.
I.e.
Oh, EI. Sorry. I have no shortening ability apparently.
Okay, so exactly what is EQ and EI?
Well, EQ stands for emotional quotient, which is the more common term for what we're talking about today, but it's actually the incorrect term. What we're talking about is emotional intelligence.
I always thought they were the same thing.
They kind of parallel to one another. The one is your ability to look within and understand your own emotions, and the other is the ability to look at other people and understand their emotions.
Okay, so which one's which?
Don't ask me. I actually can't remember which is which. We're talking about both of them combined today. It's a very complicated subject.
Okay, so alright, so let's get going then on EI or EQ.
Well, it's actually like emotional intelligence quotient or something like that. People have combined it into this weird thing, but because EQ is just such a thing that rolls off the tongue, everybody just talks about EQ.
Okay, so for the purposes of this podcast, we're going to say EQ.
Cool.
It sounds better, rolls off the tongue better.
It does. And it's kind of a sexy term. Like, hey, I got high EQ, you know?
Not as sexy as high IQ.
Well, actually, they're kind of linked, hey? But that's a whole different topic. So let's talk about the beginning of emotional intelligence. This is one of those things where the studies and the papers and so on started to appear in the 60s. Much like the other relationship stuff that we've been talking about. The 60s was apparently a roaring time of relationship and emotional dynamic studies.
Yeah, well, I think, you're coming off the time of Freud and Jung and that kind of a thing. And so, psychology was really in its heyday.
Absolutely. And so the first time that the term emotional intelligence appeared seems to have been a paper in 1965 by a dude named Michael Baldock, and another paper in 1966 by a person named B. Leoner. And I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these names incorrectly. Then it sort of, hung around and whatever it is. And in 1995, that's when it became a real thing. Because a dude by the name of Goldman published a book. The book's title was Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ.
Okay.
And you can see why that would be a worldwide kind of like phenomenon, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because, IQ is the thing that we've been measuring, but what is this emotional intelligence stuff?
Yes. So it's not just about being intellectually smart, it's about being emotionally smart too.
Exactly. Okay, so when you read all these papers and all these books and basically break it down, emotional intelligence has been defined as the ability to monitor one's own and other people's emotions.
Okay.
To discriminate between different emotions, label them appropriately, and use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior.
Okay, but are there really people who just can't do this?
Yes. So, for the purposes of today's discussion, there are 4 things that emotional intelligence allows us to do.
Okay.
Perceive, use, understand, and manage emotions.
Okay.
Okay, so you can sense what they are. You can use them appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
You can understand what's going on. And you can manage them. And that's the key, is being able to do all 4 of those.
Okay, and it's obviously not just within yourself, but in other people too.
Well, you can't necessarily manage other people's emotions, but yes.
You can perceive someone else's emotions.
That's correct. Now, there are people who cannot perceive certain parts of emotions. Like, they can't hear your tone of voice and match that to whether you're feeling angry or sad or that kind of thing. So this is quite a complicated set of dynamics. I mean, it sounds easy because we probably take for granted that we can do at least some of these things.
I suppose. I mean, if you're just able to do it naturally, like, it doesn't seem difficult, but if you just don't have that, then you can't. It's like reading and dyslexia. Like, for some people, reading is simple and easy, and for other people, it's a much harder thing that needs to be worked on.
Yes, exactly. But now, how does EQ actually manifest in everyday life? Like, if you really think about it, what does this mean, really?
Does it actually matter?
Right. Well, it kind of does. So there's 5 really important skills that EQ allows you to have.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the first one is the ability to manage stress in relationships. So, when you're fighting and your stress level is high in the relationship, if you can't manage that stress, if you can't deal with that situation, you are not going to survive that relationship. Okay, so stress shuts down our ability to feel and think rationally and to be emotionally available to one person, essentially blocking good communication until both parties feel safe enough to focus on the other one again.
Okay, so it manages stress by being able to what, like empathize with someone else or to manage the emotions in the relationship.
Yes, the ability to manage stress is part of EQ.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. So when you're having a stressful time in your relationship, your high EQ allows you to manage that stress better than if you don't have high EQ.
It's actually strange. It's like I don't think I ever thought of stress as an emotion.
But think about it, right?
No, it is. Like, what else is it? A feeling, but yes.
Which is?
An emotion. No, I know. It didn't occur to me until now. And that's why I was really struggling with, I don't understand what this means.
Right. Okay, so that's the first thing. So it's the ability to manage stress in a relationship.
Okay.
The second thing that EQ allows you to do is it allows you to recognize and manage emotions. There are basic emotions. Anger, sadness, fear, joy, and disgust are the most basic of emotions.
Okay.
Now, in order to be able to communicate, in order to be able to understand where you're at, in order to be able to work through your own emotions, you need to be able to recognize them and manage them.
But also to recognize it in someone else.
Yes.
Because, I mean, if you think someone is angry because they're not talking, whatever it is, your reaction will be very different to if they were sad. But if you can't tell the difference between the two, or even something like anger and frustration, which are similar but different.
Absolutely, because anger is not necessarily something you can fix, but frustration is.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the third thing is it allows you to communicate non-verbally, and this is super important. Using non-verbal communication is like 90% of our communication. So everything from eye contact to facial expressions, even to tone of voice, posture, gestures, how loud you're talking, how soft you're talking, So if you're in the next room and you're feeling angry about something, I can sense that you're angry by the tone of your voice. High emotional quotient allows you to do that, and you and I can kind of be on the same vibe then. We can understand each other.
Well, what's interesting for me is that this is very similar to our podcast on the love languages.
Yes.
So, I mean, for you to be able to use something like the love languages, you'd have to have a relatively good EQ so that you'd be, because a lot of that is nonverbal communication, except for the words of endearment. But, gift giving, touching, everything else, because now they escape me. But like most of it was non-verbal, but being able to first recognize that the person you're with has a specific love language and to be able to communicate with them in that way.
And to do it at the right time.
Yes.
Right? So if somebody's feeling down and you can't sense that they're feeling down and need a cup of coffee or a wow, I really like my coffee. It's like all my examples.
Was that even a secret?
Probably not. So, nonverbal communication is huge. And I can't imagine being in a relationship with somebody who doesn't get it. It must be really difficult.
Okay. So, what's the next one?
The ability to use humor and play in relationships. You remember we talked briefly about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and the whole relationship, like how to fight proactively and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, the humor was one of the ways to diffuse a situation.
Right. So the ability to use humor and play in relationships is actually a sign of high EQ.
And I suppose also using it in the right way.
Yes.
Because, I mean, like, I've come across people who will, like, joke and
it's mean.
And it's mean, or you just don't know them that well, so it doesn't work, and you're just like, you've completely misread the situation.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
That's a sign of lower EQ in that particular area. You're listening to the Lesbian Talk Show. thelesbiantalkshow.com, your hub of podcast information. The fifth one, and the last one in this particular list, is the ability to resolve conflicts in relationships. So, when you're having a fight, your ability to understand yourself and that other person means that you can diffuse conflicts.
No, I get it. When we spoke about this in the Four Horsemen podcast, the ability to still recognize the other person's point of view and know that they're having their own emotions which are valid while you're having a whole tempest of emotions is, I think, quite a skill.
Even if you don't agree with their emotions.
Yes. But recognizing that they still have a point of view, even if it isn't the same as yours.
Okay, but it's all grand and dandy to know like how EQ manifests and all that sort of stuff. But how do you know if you're in a relationship with somebody who has got good EQ?
Well, I think there are some telltale signs that they have or don't have good EQ. So I think the first one is how are they able to control their emotions? So if someone who is not able to control their emotions or regulate the volume of their emotion, then they've got a low EQ.
Absolutely.
And so what we mean by volume is not loudness of voice, but how high are their highs and how low are their lows. Some people I never have a medium sort of reaction to anything. It's always something is the most tragic thing to ever happen, or something is the most amazing thing to ever happen. It's never like, oh, this is cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you're with someone who is never able to have a middling emotion, it's very likely that they've got an EQ
deficit.
Yes.
How about somebody who's clueless about your feelings?
Well, I think that definitely comes into it. If you're not able to tell the emotion of your partner, it's very likely that you have a low IQ. And I'm not saying in every single situation, because I think sometimes people can hide emotions very well. And the ability to, in those situations, is not on you, because I mean, sometimes you just can't tell. But if someone has all the hallmarks of whatever emotion they're feeling, whether it's sadness, frustration, anger, happiness, but you're not able to correctly tell what that emotion is, then there's an issue.
So if other people can tell and you can't tell,
Yes.
there's definitely an issue.
Yes.
Okay, so without a doubt, because this is all about relationships, the inability to maintain friendships, family relationships, any kind of longer term.
So EQ is all about your relationship with other people through emotions. That's the whole premise of it. So if you're not able to maintain good relationships across the board, that's an issue. So whether it's maintaining friends, staying in peaceful relationships with family members, those are all signs that there's a low EQ problem. And I mean, you get these kinds of people. I mean, you get some people who, unless they're fighting with one family member, they're not happy.
Yeah.
Okay. You get some people who they'll be extremely best friends with someone until they're not, and then that person's dead to them. So,
yeah,
all of that. It's emotion volume, it's the ability to actually maintain a relationship for the long term.
Absolutely. And look, there are mental disorders.
Yes.
That contribute.
Yes, look, low EQ can be comorbid with things like borderline personality disorder, manic depression, all that kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
And, but having said that, this is something that even people without those disorders can struggle with.
Absolutely.
And it is definitely something that people can work to improve.
Fully.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that I thought was really interesting is somebody who always has a poker face.
Poker face.
Right. So somebody who you find really tough to read and other people can't always tell what's going on with them. You kind of get uneasy around them because you don't quite know like what's going on there. So those people often have a low emotional intelligence.
It makes me wonder if it's also part of because they don't know how to express emotions correctly either. So, like the same thing as the volume. So, but instead of being overly excited or overly sad, it's just like blank because there's no, they maybe don't know how to translate that into a physical.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, so if you're unable to express emotions and you don't have a poker face, can also manifest as being inappropriate.
Mm.
So this is somebody who can't cope with sadness, who will make jokes at a funeral, who will not understand the sad dog movie and that everybody's crying about.
Yes. Yeah. So look, if you're with someone who is like this, I mean, trying to be in a relationship with someone who you can't read their feelings, who you never know what their reaction is going to be to something because it's not what you typically would have thought that would happen in that situation. I mean, all of these things impact on a relationship.
Absolutely. And interestingly, and the
Mm-hmm.
last point in how to tell if your partner has good EQ is they don't understand the dog.
They don't understand the dog.
Right. Dogs are social animals and they have a wide range of emotions and emotional displays. But it's all physical.
Oh, it's true.
Okay, so they can't talk to you and say I'm feeling sad right now.
Mm-hmm.
But their body droops and their tail is between their legs. Or if they're really happy and the tail is wagging furiously and they're trying to play with you. Dogs are extremely
Physical creatures.
yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So if you can't tell how a dog is doing emotionally, like you probably have a low EQ.
yes, there's definitely something you need to
Mm.
work on there.
I have to say, I think this might extend to other animals too. Like I know with our cats, like especially if you're not feeling great, they will come to you and almost like in empathy, like they're being with you. So yeah, I completely get that.
Well, animals have to have a high EQ. They're social creatures,
Mm.
especially the social animals. Even the non-social animals, if you think about it, because they have to mate and whatever it is. So they have to have high emotional intelligence because they have to be able to communicate with each other in non-verbal ways.
It's true. All right, so now we know how to identify whether your or your partner's EQ is not that great.
Yep.
Okay, so how do we go about improving it?
Well, let's talk about that next week because there's exercises you can do.
Okay.
In the meantime, for patrons, let's do a quick exercise to tell if you have high EQ.
EQ quiz.
An EQ quiz, that's it.
Awesome.
So it's a patron exclusive, and if you're interested, you can sign up at the link in the show notes, and you'll get the exclusive quiz.
Great.
But that's all for this episode.
Yeah. If you like this episode, please share it on social media with your friends, your family, anyone who you suspect may have low EQ.
Or who would just find this interesting because I thought this was really interesting.
And don't forget to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps other people to find us.
Yep. And come talk to us at the Lesbian Talk Show chat group on Facebook.
And let us know your thoughts on EQ.
Absolutely. And how high is yours? So we're going to totally do this quiz now.
We are.
Okay.